So let's walk through this northbound process quickly here. And I guess one thing to note as we kind of get going through this process, remember at any given time, we're going to be talking about three distinct freight movements outside of the customs piece of this. The reason for that is the power units that are picking your cargo up, crossing the border, and then ultimately taking it to the destination, whether it's coming to you in the US or going to your customer in Mexico, are going to be three separate power units. They might all be part of the same company, they might be agents of the same company, but remember they are different. That just adds one layer of complexity to this issue. So in the northbound process, you order a truckload of goods from your supplier in Mexico. You might be responsible, they might be responsible for the actual trucking. If you're responsible, you contact your carrier. Maybe you contact Scarborough because we handle that for you. Maybe you have your own trucking contract. However that works, that's fine. And then obviously at that point, the truck shows up and it's time to pick up that cargo. At that point, documents do get generated. And right then, we want to make sure a couple of things. One is that your Mexican your Mexican shipper already has a Mexican customs broker registered through the government, because cargo that travels from Mexico into the US requires a northbound pedimento. Pedimento is what we would like to do the word customs entry. Mexico requires both a northbound and a southbound customs entry. So we want to make sure that, one, they've already registered and that's taken care of before we start the shipping process, or else we're going to face delays really early on. It tends to be that process, that register process, takes anywhere from 5 to 7 days, assuming that everything is moving at a very quick pace. Those of you who have dealt a lot with those shippers, customers down there, probably realize that quick isn't always the adjective we use to describe their pace, or the adverb, I should say, that we use to describe their pace. In any event, assuming that they already have a broker set up, that cargo gets loaded, documents get created. Now we're talking about commercial invoice, packing lists, bills of lading. As that cargo gets shipped, you will want copies of those along with your Mexican broker. So what will happen is, once the cargo starts moving northbound, your Mexican broker will contact the US customs broker. Now in the case of Scarborough, let's say you're a Scarborough customer, it's the same company. So it's a Scarborough de Mexico and it's Scarborough International. Scarborough de Mexico, obviously our Mexican operation, and International, our US one. So it's the same company talking back and forth. But in some instances, and it's very common, that maybe your Mexican customer shipper wants their own broker and they have that relationship set up. We totally understand that, and it's not an issue whatsoever. It's very common that the two parties, the US broker and the Mexican broker, aren't related, just as common as if they are. So in either scenario, on that northbound side, a couple of interesting things happen is that we will get the documents on the US side, as well as, like I said, your Mexican broker getting the documents on their side. From that point, what happens is that the US broker goes ahead and files that customs entry. Now there's a couple of things to note there. One of them is that the company that's taking the cargo, that picked up the cargo, remember, is not the company crossing the border. So a lot of times that's called a drayage company. You might see it on your bill as border crossing. And what that is that truckload arrived in Nuevo Laredo, who then turned it over to what we refer to as a drayage company. That drayage company has its own unique SCAT code. So that's the 4 letters in front of any bill of lading that it issues. Like Scarborough's is STMK. So if you ever use Scarborough Logistics, our asset-based division, STMK are the 4 is Scarborough's SCAT code. If you use our NVO for on the ocean side, it's SIXL for 6 lines. So SCAT codes are very common. So me as the broker, I take that information in and I file that entry using the SCAT code of that drayage company. So sometimes the broker, you might get this request saying, well, hey, I still don't know who the drayage company is. And you might be thinking, well, does it matter? Just file an entry. I can't. And I can't because I need that SCAT code, because that's the only way that Customs is going to match this up as that cargo physically progresses across the border. Once I get that SCAT code, I go ahead and I can file the Customs entry. Once I file that entry, I then provide a copy of that along with a manifest back to the Mexican broker and the carrier. And then what happens is that carrier and broker file the manifest and then file the pedimento. So then as your goods cross the border, physically move across, all the boxes get checked for both customs authorities. Once your goods, let's assume that process is worked out relatively smooth. Once your goods cross the border into the U.S., that drayage company can only take your goods up to 25 miles away from the Mexican border. Any of you that have ever traveled down there, it doesn't matter what interstate or highway you're on, you get to the 25-mile marker headed north away from the border, there are customs checkpoints to make sure that you are either U.S. citizens or you have the proper immigration documents to be farther into the country. That 25-mile zone is the commercial zone. So because of that, now we get to that third leg of transportation. So your carrier, that drayage company, will then drop that truckload, that trailer off at whoever is going to move, whatever power unit is going to move that cargo from Laredo to wherever it's going within the United States. So that, excuse me, is kind of the process in a nutshell. And like I said, if you think through it, it's very similar to the process that we see if you're importing from China. It's very similar to the process that you see if you're importing from Europe, if you're importing from Canada. So there's not a lot of differences. The biggest differences to note is to make sure, like I said, that your Mexican shipper already has a Mexican broker, step one. And assuming they have one already set up, this process should go pretty smooth. Just ensure that, I guess the second piece is that your U.S. broker knows who is handling the Mexican piece of this transaction.